Godzilla's Revenge, also known as All Monsters Attack, is the 10th entry in Godzilla's classic Showa era, and is widely considered by fans and non-fans who have heard fans say this as the worst entry, not just in the Showa era, but in Godzilla's entire long filmography.
This is undoubtedly the worst of all the Godzilla movies, by far. Any way you look at it, it's absolutely awful.
Definitely, in my opinion, the worst Godzilla film. It's completely what I do not want in a Godzilla film.
This movie sucks. Without a shadow of a doubt, is it the worst Godzilla movie ever made.
And fan consensus is a bit of a funny thing. I find in a lot of cases it tends to be self-perpetuating. People will believe something is the worst not because they personally have found it to be the worst, but that they've heard enough people say it that they want to go along with that which we as fans know to be true. The myth of how bad it is. Sonic 06 is the worst Sonic game because everyone says it is. Thor: The Dark World is the worst MCU movie because everyone says it is. Cause like, what is everyone? It's enough people to qualify as everyone, and then it becomes this snowball that just keeps going down the hill and getting bigger, picking up not necessarily people who agree, but agree enough that the thing is bad to take the path of least resistance and join in on calling it that. Godzilla's Revenge is the story of Ichiro, a young latchkey kid with constantly working parents that we barely see.
Be sure and do your homework before you play. I left some cake in the cupboard. I'll fix supper when I come home, Mother.
Who's having to put up with bullying from other kids, and as a little Godzilla fan, dreams of going to Monster Island and befriending Minya, or Minilla, the son of Godzilla, of being his best friend and watching Godzilla fights from the sidelines, cheering him on. And in these fantasy sequences, Minya too is dealing with bullying, and so together they're able to learn to stand up for themselves. I think that's a brilliant idea for a Godzilla movie. I don't think that this is something that people argue, but I think it's worth being very clear about that. I think a lot of Godzilla fans and casual moviegoers undervalue this idea because they're coming at this film with the perspective of adults, or even worse, as teenagers who scoff at anything being too childish, which I think for a long time has been a lot of the kind of Godzilla fans you find online, who hold up the darker, more serious, more grown-up Heisei era as peak, or whatever. Godzilla's Revenge is about as far away as you can get from what a kid like that would want. And as much as I love this movie, it's not for me anymore. It was for me when I was a little Godzilla fan, when that was what I wanted, to sit on the sidelines and watch Godzilla fight. I think there are 4 main things about this movie that have led it to gaining this reputation as the worst Godzilla movie. Number 1. It was the first new Godzilla movie after Destroy All Monsters. Now, for those unaware, Destroy All Monsters, the previous entry in the Godzilla series, was originally intended as the final film in the series. And it shows. It's a bombastic finale event with 11 different monsters on screen. Monsters that had been introduced in all of Toho's other movies, like Frankenstein vs. Baragon, or King Kong Escapes, Fair and the Unbelievable, Godzilla Raids Again, Mothra, Son of Godzilla. Everyone was here, and it felt big. It felt like a fitting climax to a truly golden age of kaiju movies in the 50s and 60s. And so the fact that Toho and Ishiro Honda decided to make another Godzilla movie, a much less impressive Godzilla movie just a year later, is seen as undermining that, failing to live up to the scope and spectacle of Destroy All Monsters. To which I would say, not every movie has to be Destroy All Monsters. And don't get me wrong, I love Destroy All Monsters, but it's boring. Destroy All Monsters is remembered for its grand finale monster mash, and that's fair, it's incredible to watch. But it takes a long time to get there. Godzilla's Revenge isn't trying to be this grand, suspenseful sci-fi thriller, but that doesn't make it worse. I find the small scale of this movie and Ichiro's daydreaming perspective really cozy. The world is not in danger. Ichiro is just lonely and scared. He wants to be big and strong like Godzilla. I kinda find that more compelling than another alien invasion story, one of countless that Toho made. Number 2. The film's use of stock footage.
Shameless stock footage from Son of Godzilla and Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. And I don't mean that they reuse some of the same shots here and there. They literally recycle the same scenes. If they would have included more, it could have been a best of Godzilla compilation.
I can't imagine why this is considered to be one of the worst Godzilla movies. It had a ton of great scenes. From better movies!
I know people say the 1998 Godzilla is the worst one ever made, but at least that movie was a movie. It didn't just cut together scenes from other movies and then make a movie around it.
So yes, transparently, as a way of cutting down the budget for this film, most of the kaiju action that Ichiro is witnessing from the sidelines is taken from the previous films Son of Godzilla and Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. So to a lot of fans who value the monster fights as the main attraction, that makes this film kind of worthless. Or if not worthless, worth less. We get some fun new stuff with Minya's bully monster, Gabara, but a lot of the stuff we're watching is, as Godzilla fans with Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster and Son of Godzilla available to us, stuff we've seen before. Now I think this very much comes down to context. Like when this film originally released in 1969, there was no home video yet. At least, not much. I do have this little 8mm film of Godzilla vs. Mothra. But in terms of actually going back and watching all of Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster and all of Son of Godzilla, you couldn't necessarily do that back then. So in that context, I think it's less of a put-off to reuse those fight scenes. The context I came to it from was as a kid who was hungry for Godzilla movies all the time, but didn't have all of them available to me all the time. I had Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster on tape, but I watched it after Godzilla's Revenge. I was able to rent Son of Godzilla from my local video store, but I didn't have it at home. I wasn't stupid. I recognized that these were reused scenes when I was a kid, but I didn't care, and I still kind of find it weird how much people care. I'm not rewatching Son of Godzilla and Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster that often. I don't mind watching those fight scenes again. I mean, okay, the giant condor one's a weird inclusion, but even that is like, yeah, okay, that's funny. But even if this was just a best of episode, which I don't think it is, I think everything else that's in the movie is of value, but even if it was, that's still fine and cool. I don't really think that makes it any less worth watching. And I just truly can't find it in me to mind. The recontextualization of these fight scenes that you get from the occasional insert of Ichiro and Minya cheering Godzilla on, it really makes it worthwhile. It's this interesting meta thing of understanding the young audience of these films, and inserting this audience surrogate in, honestly, a really fun way. Number 3. I said 4, right? What was 3? Ichiro. Ichiro is number 3. Ichiro.
Whoever voiced over that kid, I swear I want to kill him, because that voiceover's terrible.
Ah, children, the real monsters of Godzilla movies. Come on, kids, why don't you cross the actual street? Maybe it'll make the movie shorter. 5 minutes alone with this kid and anyone would want to punch him.
We meet our main character, annoying as kid. God, I hate this kid.
A lot of people find this kid annoying, or kids in Godzilla movies in general annoying. And yeah, I just don't really understand that. In a series with a lot of protagonists that are stuffy, generic guys in suits and ties, a young protagonist lends this movie a unique perspective, one that's much more fantastical and adventure-y. I mean, y'all like Earthbound, right? Y'all like the Goonies and shit? Childhood is a compelling thing to write about. And I don't think Ishiro Honda was wrong to make a film not just aimed specifically at them, but made about their perspective. I think in a series that had definitely started to blend together quite a lot in the last few films, this was a new and interesting thing to do. And number 4. Minya talks. This is an interesting thing because this is the number 4 thing that is what I think is why people hate this movie. And it's the number 1 thing of why I love this movie.
By the way, he talks. Yeah, Minya actually talks, and it's like the weirdest thing. And it's just like, oh my god, what? And you're like, why? Why is this a thing?
Kill it with fire. I know this movie has the power to do that, so kill it with fire.
So yeah, if you've made it this far into the video as an outsider who's never watched Godzilla's Revenge, and you don't know this yet, yeah, I am honored to be able to tell you that yeah, this is the movie where Godzilla's son talks. And he sounds like...
Godzilla says that I should learn to fight my own battles, you know.
Why does he sound like that? Because it's great. Shut up.
Gabara,
Gabra?
Himself! Let's get out of here!
This is so good, and if you don't think so, I don't know how I can make you understand. Cheesiness is a really divisive thing. You might react to that and think, this is stupid, and so yeah, it's the worst. Or you might react with, this is stupid, and that's really endearing. And I think Godzilla's son having a voice, and that voice being, Godzilla says that I should learn to fight my own battles, you know. I think that's the kind of idiosyncratic nugget of gold that is why I love this series so deeply. Why it speaks to me so much, and why I think it's so fun. This is what Godzilla movies are. This is what Godzilla movies can be. They are unrestrained by what is too silly. Unrestrained by what wouldn't be in keeping with the series up to this point. Aliens weren't in keeping with the original movie. Fairies weren't in keeping with the original movie. The goofy tone of King Kong vs. Godzilla wasn't in keeping with the original movie. I think this is really funny. I think this is really endearing. I think this was a step too far for some people, in terms of how silly these movies should be. And I respect that, I think. I do. But the worst Godzilla movie? I don't think we should be punishing these things for being too out there. I think too boring is a much worse failing than too out there. So that's my diagnosis of how we wound up with this fan consensus. And I might be wrong, you know, I might be missing some things or failing to articulate some things that people watching will be thinking, no, that's not why it's the worst Godzilla movie, you didn't say it right. Or maybe my rebuttals are inadequate. That's fine, you know, I'm not really arguing with people who dislike this movie. But if I can make some people reconsider the next time the opportunity presents itself to roll with this self-perpetuating consensus, I'll feel like I'll have done my part for my childhood favorite Godzilla movie, Godzilla's Revenge, as featured by the Criterion Collection. And now, to close things off, here is a review of Godzilla's Revenge that I wrote for my blog when I was 6 years old. Ahem. On Godzilla's Revenge, Macarus bit Gabra. I wasn't scared, but the kid learned to fight like Godzilla and fought two mean thieves who were trying to kill him.